Welcome back from the break. I hope you are still refreshed and are ready for this next segment of the lesson. In this lesson, as you can see on the concept map, we will be looking at the components of the respiratory system and the function of these components. So firstly, we are looking at the mouth. The mouth is an open cavity that is found there. A cavity refers to an opening. It allows air to move in and also out. And then we also have the nose there. As we know, we have the nostrils at the end of our nose. And inside there, we have another cavity, which is called the nasal cavity. It is also an opening that leads to the pharynx. Now, the pharynx is found behind over there and basically connects the mouth cavity and the nasal cavity. In the nose, if you were to look at yourself or try look up so that you can see the inside of your nostrils, you will see that there are little hairs, fine hairs in your nose. The hair traps dust particles in your nose. Okay, now you already know of the nasal cavity. We will look at other components and how they function in the respiratory system. Next, we have the pharynx. The pharynx is located there, like I have said. You have the nasal cavity and your mouth cavity that basically connect there behind, and they form the pharynx. It is an open tract. Air passes from the nose to the trachea. The trachea is here. And then looking at the trachea. Now the trachea is a long, straight, tube-like structure. It has C-shaped cartilage rings. It is lined with cilia and goblet cells. Now, if ever you wanted to know where the trachea is, you can just put your hand in front of your neck. You will feel your trachea there. And it's hard, but a bit soft, so that gives you an indication that it has C-shaped cartilage rings in between. And this is basically to allow the flexibility of the neck here in front. The trachea enables the exchange of gases. The trachea remains open to allow air moving in and out. It sweeps away impurities such as dust, and it also secretes mucus. You saw there that it has what we call goblet cells, and goblet cells are what allow the secretion of mucus. Now, looking at the picture alongside, you can see a set of lungs, the right lung and the left lung. And here we have our trachea. We have said that the trachea is an airway or an air passage. It basically allows the movement of air in and out. Next to it, we have a cross-section of the trachea. Here we see that the trachea has C-shaped cartilage rings. This is to allow flexibility and movement of the neck, and also to allow the esophagus to fit in behind the trachea. Next, we have what we call the bronchi. Here is a picture to show us that we have just looked at the trachea, and from the trachea will split into two bronchi. We also call it bronchus if it is one. Each bronchus enters into each of the two lungs. So you have the left bronchus and the right bronchus. They have C-shaped cartilage rings. And we know that the cartilage rings are to allow flexibility. They are lined with goblet cells. By now we know that the goblet cells secrete mucus. And something to remember, bronchus is for singular, so it's one bronchus. Bronchi is plural form, so it's two bronchi. And then we will look at the bronchiole and bronchioles in the next slide. We then have the bronchioles. Okay, reminder, it's plural, so we are looking at more than one bronchiole. The bronchi, remember, we had the trachea. Now the bronchi that split from the trachea. And what splits from the bronchi is the bronchioles. Here are your bronchioles. Okay, bronchi branches into smaller tubes called the bronchioles. There are no cartilage rings. They transport air to the alveoli. So the alveoli, so each of the bronchioles are connected to the alveoli. Moving on to the next components, we will be looking at the lungs. We have two lungs, a right lung and a left lung. As you can see, there we have the right lung and the left lung. And then we also have the alveoli. These are small air sacs found at the end of the bronchioles. As you can see there, I am drawing there. And this is what they look like. They are surrounded by small blood capillaries. And please note that singular form is alveolus, and plural form will be alveoli. They also increase the surface area for gaseous exchange. This basically means that there will be more air to be kept in by the lungs. Next components, we are looking at the ribs. These are bones that protect the lungs from mechanical damage. We also have the diaphragm found at the base of the ribs, and this is a dome-shaped muscle. Then lastly, we have intercostal muscles, which are found in between the ribs. Looking at our diagram there, you can see the ribs. The ribs are the bones there. The intercostal muscles that are found in between the bones of the ribs. And then lastly, the diaphragm found at the base of the ribs, which forms a dome shape. We have our concept map in front of us, and this means that we will be looking at the main processes associated with the respiratory system. First, we will look at breathing, also known as inhalation and exhalation. Looking at our diagram on the side, inhalation is also referred to inspiration, whereas exhalation is also referred to expiration. Okay, during this process, oxygen moves into the lungs and carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide is pushed out of the lungs. The two processes are associated with breathing are namely inhalation, where you inhale or take in oxygen, and exhalation, where carbon dioxide is pushed out of the lungs. We inhale oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide. Breathing happens in a continuous cycle. Okay, in front of us, we now have a table to compare what happens during inhalation and what happens during exhalation. So during inhalation, when air moves into the lungs, the rib cage expands. You can try doing that at home. Just take a deep breath of air in and see what happens to your lungs as you have air moving into your lungs. The diaphragm contracts, meaning it will become flat and it flattens, causing it to move downwards. Now the volume of the thoracic cavity, which is the chest area, increases and the pressure decreases. We move on to exhalation. Now when you try and release that air, you will see, okay, when air is forced out of the lungs, you will see that the rib cage contracts, meaning it will become smaller. It moves downwards and inwards. The diaphragm then relaxes and becomes more of a dome shape. So it is not flat like it is during inhalation. There, it is more dome shaped. The volume of the thoracic cavity, meaning the chest cavity, will now decrease because there's less air in the thoracic cavity and the pressure increases. Here you have two diagrams showing you what happens during the process of inhalation and exhalation. Main things that happen, we saw, and as a practice, I just asked you to do or take a deep breath in and see or observe that your rib cage will expand, causing the diaphragm to flatten or pull down. And then what happens when you breathe out? The diaphragm will relax, becoming more dome-shaped, and you will have your rib cage contracting, meaning it will move in. Now, the second process is called gaseous exchange. As the phrase suggests, it is an exchange of gases. Okay, this process takes place in the lungs and in the cells through diffusion. We have a new term there, diffusion. And to help you understand what diffusion is better, I'd like you to think of what happens if you were to spray air freshener into the room. Where you spray it, we would say it is more concentrated, but over time, the scent of the air freshener will move to spread across the room. That is an example of diffusion. So diffusion can happen with scents, like I've given you an example of an air freshener. It can also happen with like a concentrated syrup. You can also think of what happens when you pour concentrated syrup into a glass filled with water. The concentrated syrup is most likely to settle at the bottom, and if you stir or wait for a while, it will mix well together, and then it will have like an equal distribution of taste or sugar in the cup. So diffusion defined, it is the movement of particles from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. So this is what happens in our lungs and in the cells during the process of gaseous exchange. You have air particles that move in, that are concentrated, and then after a while they basically settle, they diffuse, and they become equally distributed. They are basically moving from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. As you can see there with the particles, we could say that the red particles show an area of high concentration, and the yellow or orange particles show an area of low concentration. After some time, they become equally distributed. Okay, we have gaseous exchange in the lung, and here it happens in each alveolus, which is surrounded by a network of capillaries. The oxygen and carbon dioxide diffuse between the alveoli and the blood in the capillaries. The oxygen diffuses into the cells of the alveolus, then into the blood capillaries. Carbon dioxide diffuses out of the blood and into the cells of the alveoli, then into the air. As we can see there, there's a movement of oxygen into the alveolus. Then it diffuses between the alveolus there. Okay, this is the air sac there. And as you can see, this is the blood vessel. It says it is filled with red blood cells. So there's also an exchange of gases between the alveolus and the blood capillaries. Oxygen will diffuse into the cells of the alveolus and then back into the blood capillaries. There you have the picture that I have just explained, but we can also look at it again. There's a movement of oxygen into the alveolus. There's an exchange of gases between the alveolus and the blood capillaries. Oxygen diffuses, and then we have carbon dioxide, which will diffuse between the blood capillary and the alveolus, and then move out of the alveolus. Next, we look at gaseous exchange in the cells. Here we have oxygen that diffuses into the cells of the alveoli and then into the blood capillaries. There you can see we also have another diagram of the alveolus. It is surrounded by a blood capillary, and basically there's a diffusion of gases of oxygen between the cells of the alveolus and also into the blood capillaries, and then carbon dioxide diffuses out or moves out of the blood capillaries into the alveolus and then out of the alveolus. And that is the carbon dioxide that we are going to exhale. Carbon dioxide diffuses out of the blood and into the cells of the alveolus, then into the air. And remember, diffusion is the movement of particles from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. So with the explanation of the process of gas exchange in the lungs and in the cells, we were able to see how the gases oxygen and carbon dioxide diffuse in and out of the alveolus. Now looking at the last process that is related to the respiratory system, we have cellular respiration. Cellular respiration happens in the mitochondria of the cells. Here we have a human cell, and we know that we find the mitochondria in the human cell. There's a mitochondria. Here's an enlarged version of the mitochondria. We know that it releases chemical energy in food. Now, we by now should know that we need food to help with processes that happen in our body, because the food contains nutrients, and this is what helps give energy to all the processes that are taking place in the human body. Lastly, on our concept map, we have health issues. We will be looking at health issues related to the respiratory system. And the first health issue, is asthma. Asthma is caused by allergies that narrow or inflame the airways. On the side, we have a diagram. We know that the airways include tracts or passages like the bronchioles, the bronchi, and the trachea. So here we are specifically looking at the bronchioles. They constrict, meaning that they become smaller due to muscle spasm. And then second health issue that we will be looking at is called bronchitis. I believe that the word gives you an idea of which area of the air passage or which air passage is affected. Okay. With bronchitis, inflamed lining of the bronchi due to an infection or an irritant. Now looking at the picture, which shows an infected bronchi, you will see that the lining is inflamed or swollen, so the opening is narrow, and this is due to an infection or an irritant. It says there the airway becomes blocked, and basically this is the bronchi. Third health issue is lung cancer. Lung cancer is normally caused by smoking or severe pollution. And lastly, we look at tuberculosis or TB. This is an infectious disease that is caused by the bacteria, Mycobacterium. And these are the 4 health issues that are common and are related to the respiratory system. We have come to the end of our lesson. I hope that you enjoyed it and have learned a lot. See you soon.